Jesus revealed a forbidden way to speak to God, and it was hidden. What would it mean if the moments before every great thing Jesus did were not accidental, but deliberate? What if there was a pattern, a doorway he walked through again and again, a way of speaking to the Father that the crowd never learned, that later generations no longer taught openly? What if what most of us call prayer, petitions, lists, audible asking, is only the outer courtyard of a deeper room Jesus entered before power moved? You have probably prayed in the common way, a steady stream of needs, quick pleas, urgent requests that feel like throwing voices over a wall. Sometimes those prayers land, and the temperature of life changes. Often they don't. They can feel thin, like your words reach a ceiling and stop. That experience is familiar to many of us, sincere prayer that seems to stop short of presence. Listen to three truths the Gospels quietly place before us. First, Jesus often withdrew. Second, he spent time in a posture that looked like stillness, gratitude, recognition. Third, after that interior posture, he spoke, and something happened. Think of the morning when the city was still dark and the crowds had not yet arrived. Mark tells us he rose very early and slipped away to a solitary place to pray. The scripture doesn't dramatize this as merely taking a break from ministry. It places the withdrawal before the next day's direction and power. He stepped away from the crowd and entered a different rhythm. Consider another moment when thousands stood with hungry eyes. The crowd pressed in. The need was enormous. In the middle of that pressure, Jesus took bread, looked up, blessed, and gave thanks, and then broke it. The giving of thanks is not incidental. He oriented outward need back toward the Father, and what followed was provision beyond arithmetic. The miracle did not begin with the calculation of supply. It began with a posture toward the source. And remember the day Lazarus lay in the tomb, the weeping, the murmur of the crowd. Jesus, before calling out to raise a man from death, addressed the Father. He thanked God with a voice loud enough the Gospel records it. His words were not a bargaining plea. They were a recognition. The Father hears him. He spoke from a settled place that presumed reception. Then he called, and life answered. These are not isolated quirks. Across the accounts, in the still, solitary hours, in the act of looking up and giving thanks, in the felt sense of power being present and acknowledged, a pattern appears. Jesus did not merely entreat a distant will. He aligned himself with the Father and spoke from within that alignment. There is a rhythm here. Withdraw, enter interior stillness, speak as one who knows the Father has already heard. When I say forbidden, I mean this. The practice was not lost because the words of Scripture was silenced. The Gospels remain.
What was buried was the lived method, the way of entering the inner chamber that makes those words come alive. Over time, that way was moved to the margins, practiced by small communities who guarded an inner discipline, while the visible church shifted toward rituals and structures that could be taught to many. There is a careful historical explanation here, not a dark accusation. Systems that need to be replicated at scale often prioritize repeatable forms. Initiatory practices, the ones that require time, patience, and individual guidance, tend to be reserved for those who commit to formation. So the inner way of Jesus was preserved in places, but withdrawn from public everyday instruction. This matters because the gospel itself gives a clue to the nature of the place Jesus inhabited before he spoke. When Jesus says, "Go into your room and close the door," he is speaking to a people who already understand houses, courtyards, and inner chambers. The plain reading in Matthew points to privacy, avoid showmanship. But the Jewish imagination of Jesus' day also knows of inner rooms, of treasuries, of the heart as an inner chamber where presence dwells. Read another way, that instruction is not only ethical, don't pray to be seen, but ontological. Go into the inner room where God's presence is, close the door on distraction, and let the Father meet you there. This interior chamber is not a physical place you build with bricks. It is a posture, a subtle ontological shift. The door is not a lock, but a threshold of attention. You can be in a crowd, and in a moment of interior entry, stand within that room. It requires recognition and training. It is a place where the voice of need grows quiet, and the voice of remembrance grows loud. Remembrance of the Father's presence, remembrance of who you are in Him. From there, your words are not merely petitions. They are echoes of an alignment. The Gospels preserve stories that show the character of what I am calling the inner way. The paralytic who was lowered through the roof is instructive. His friends refused to be satisfied by mere proximity. They took the risk of getting him close enough that Jesus could see his need and the faith that accompanied it. Jesus, seeing their faith, addressed deeper things than mobility alone. He spoke from a place that recognized and received faith, and what followed was restoration. The scene shows the movement from relational alignment to visible healing. When a woman in the press reached out simply to touch the hem of his garment, Jesus felt power leave him. He turned not to rebuke, but to name a dynamic beyond mere technique. Who touched me? There is the sense of a center being engaged, a current moved. He then addressed her and declared her faith had made her whole. The miracle in this telling responds to an interior contact more than to an external formula. I will not heap the text with ancient mysteries.
The point is not that Jesus had secret words you must memorize. The point is that he cultivated a posture before speaking. He habitually entered what I will call the inner chamber, a place of quiet attention where presence can be known and a life aligned to the Father's. Before any great word of power or radical provision, he stood in the room of recognition. Historically, many early initiates and monastics remembered this way. The Desert Fathers speak in their own idiom of the inner heart, the guarded mind, the secret place of prayer. The early church included forms of communal and solitary training that were meant to form the person's interior life: repetition, silence, watchfulness, breath, and the cultivation of attention. These were not intended as mysterious gates to exclude people, but as disciplines to shape readiness. Over centuries, as the church developed structures that needed to serve vast numbers, the outer forms, public liturgies, communal prayers, sacraments, became rightly central. They anchor and sustain communities. But they do not automatically transmit the practice of standing in the inner room. That discipline moved into smaller circles of formation. To say that the inner way was hidden is therefore to say it was withheld from broad casual instruction. It was preserved in places by those who practiced steady interior training. That movement away from common teaching was not necessarily conspiratorial. It was a functional shift across a growing institution. What follows from that shift is that many faithful believers inherited words of Scripture and rich corporate practices, but not always the intimate method Jesus used before he spoke. And here we stand, wanting both integrity of structure and the living encounter the gospel hints at. If this idea disturbs you, if it feels like the next step in your spiritual curiosity, I should be gentle. Discovering the doorway does not mean owning a quick formula. The door opens by recognition, not force. It is found by patience, not by demanding results. Still, there is a beginning practice you can start now. If you feel drawn to take the first steps and would like a guided beginning practice and access to the brief sacred scrolls that outline this path, the link in the description will take you there. Now, if you will, receive a clear, careful invitation to begin. I will label it plainly: start. This is not the whole path. It is a doorway threshold, a way to recognize the edge of the inner chamber. Start. Sit somewhere you will not be disturbed for 10 minutes. Allow your spine to be upright but not rigid. Close your eyes if that helps. Bring your awareness to the breath without forcing it. Let your breath be the first line of contact, not to change it, but to notice it, as if you were settling at the edge of a quiet pond. As you breathe out, imagine releasing a layer. Picture each exhale as loosening a strap, opening a hand. You do not have to name everything. You can simply let the tension of worry, the list of needs, the small narratives that tug at you, ease a little with each outward breath. Do this several times. Notice how the mind still returns, how thoughts come in like small waves. Do not chase them. Breathe and let them be. After a few cycles, bring to attention something small and true, a single memory of the Father's goodness, a morning when you felt seen, a kindness received, a small answered prayer. Allow that memory to rest in the chest like a warm stone. Feel its weight. Let its warmth spread without forcing a spiritual experience. This is a practice of remembering, not manufacturing. As you stay with that warmth, allow the edges of yourself to feel softer. Instead of rehearsing a list for God, listen for a sense of belonging. You are not trying to produce an effect. You are acknowledging presence. In that posture, you may notice a subtle settling, a tiny interior shift that is not dramatic but unmistakable, a slight quieting of the mind, a steadiness in the heart, an ease around the throat. This is the first recognition of the inner chamber. Stand at that threshold. Do not rush to the other side. The edge is where formation happens. You have probably been tempted in prayer to move quickly from longing to asking to results. The threshold discipline invites patience. Wait and learn the shape of that stillness in your own body. It comes differently for each person, sometimes as a quiet warmth, sometimes as a held breath that releases, sometimes simply as less panic. Notice what it feels like rather than trying to create a specific sign. If words arise, let them be simple and present tense, a short phrase of recognition, not a list. You might say inwardly, "Father, I am here," or "I remember you," or "Thank you." Avoid the temptation to manufacture elaborate phrases or spiritual jargon. Keep it human and honest. If a thanksgiving rises, and in the gospel scenes we noted Jesus often gave thanks, give thanks for something specific and immediate. Gratitude is not a magic word, but it is a posture that reorients us toward the source. Speak from the place of recognition rather than from lack. Finish the practice by returning to the breath. Notice the quality of the room within you. You may not have experienced anything dramatic. That is entirely normal. What matters is that you practiced recognition. You visited the threshold and stood there a little longer than usual. Do this start practice daily if you can for a week. Keep it short and regular. The inner way is not a sprint, but a slow apprenticeship. Over time, the threshold will feel more like a doorway and less like a wall. Remember, this is the beginning. It does not guarantee particular outcomes. It trains attention. There is also a character to how Jesus spoke from that place. He often spoke with gratitude in the past tense, as if the answer were already present. He gave thanks before the visible sign.
That is not to teach a manipulative formula, say the words and get the thing. It is to teach an identity. When you stand in the inner room, you speak from the memory of the Father's presence and from the reality you are aligned to. This kind of speech carries a different authority because it comes from union, not only from pleading. When we speak of authority, let us be humble. Authority in the gospel is filial authority. It issues from being a son or daughter who knows the Father. It is not dominance or coercion. The second stage teaching I will share in time is about how this alignment matures into authorized speech. But that second stage must be approached responsibly. It presupposes steady practice, moral formation, and pastoral discernment. The door does not open for an instant of technique. It opens for the one who has learned to abide. You may ask, can any believer enter this room? Yes, but it is learned. The Gospels do not intend to make access exclusive. They show a teacher who practiced what he taught. He invited people to follow, to learn, to be formed. The early monasteries and small groups preserved that training model precisely because formation takes time. If you are drawn, patient practice is the path. There are common pitfalls worth naming so you can move with caution. First, do not equate interior experience with spiritual superiority. The presence you feel is for humility and service. Second, do not chase signs. Many inner voices can be ordinary emotions or wishful thinking. Learn discernment from steady practice, and if possible, from wise guidance. Third, do not abandon communal practices. The inner room does not replace gatherings, sacraments, or acts of service. It complements them and deepens their meaning. A short caution about history and institutions. When I say the inner way was withheld from public teaching, I mean that as a descriptive historical process. As communities grew, practices that required individualized formation became harder to transmit widely, so they were often preserved in places devoted to formation: small communities, monastic settings, initiatory circles. This was not necessarily secretive in a malicious sense. It was functional. Yet the result is that many believers now lack the training Jesus practiced. The remedy is not to denounce institutions, but to recover practices within faithful, accountable contexts. We are nearing a decisive observation. Speech that issues from the inner chamber tends to be different in tone. It is less anxious. It carries a settled firmness. It often takes the form of thanksgiving, declaration, or compassionate command. It is not theatrical. It is the natural language of someone who has already been met. If you are ready for the next step after the start practice, the second stage instruction that trains the movement from alignment into expression that carries authority, understand this will take time and guidance. It is not a part of casual consumption.
It is formation under guidance, a communal apprenticeship. For those who feel that pull, there is a private practice community where we walk this path together, with careful disciplines, shared testimonies, and guarded materials called the sacred scrolls. If the first practice resonates and you sense a call to continue, the invitation at the end of this message will point you to that community. Membership is not about prestige, it is about a disciplined environment for practice. Participation is recommended for those who have already attended to the start rhythm for some weeks and who seek accountable growth. Before I close, return with me once more to the gospel images. Note how the sequence repeats: withdrawal, interior orientation, speech that presumes reception, and then visible movement. Notice that Jesus' speech is almost always relational. He calls the Father, addresses others with compassion, acknowledges faith. The method is not a secret incantation, but a relational posture. He taught his disciples not only what to say, but how to be with the Father, so that their words would be caught in the current of love already present. Keep this in mind if discouragement arises. Many of the first followers did not understand immediately. They walked with Jesus, failed, learned, returned, and were slowly formed. The inner way is patient. It is shaped by nightly disciplines and daytime choices. You will not master it overnight. The daily, simple practice of sitting at the threshold will, over time, turn your asking into speaking that is rooted in recognition. So, go back to that posture. The breath, the letting go, the small memory of grace, the quiet thanksgiving. Stand at the threshold and wait. The place near the door itself is a kind of prayer. There is no hurry. There is gentle urgency, an invitation to take the next step now, to stop treating prayer as habit and to begin treating it as homecoming. If you would like the short guided beginning practice and the sacred scrolls that outline the next steps, you can find a link in the description. It will take you to a small private resource meant to help those ready to put in the steady work. The scrolls are not a shortcut, they are a guide. I will leave you with a final exhortation that is neither promise nor prophecy, but a pastoral charge. Practice. In the gospel moments we examined, power did not arrive as a show. It arrived where attention met presence. Your prayers need not be long to be deep. They need not be dramatic to be true. They need pause, patient attention, and the humility to be formed. Stand at the door more often than you once did. Remember who you are in the presence of the Father. Speak from that place when words come. For those who feel the pull to continue, there is a private practice community and the sacred scrolls waiting for those who have taken the start and desire to be trained further. The path is ancient, the steps simple, and the cost, steady practice.
If this message reached you, step inward again tonight. Sit. Breathe. Feel the edge of the room. Stay there. Over time, the door will no longer look closed. It will become the entrance to an interior life Jesus walked and left for us, a way to speak to the Father that begins not with asking, but with being.